on a day where we see the S&P setting up for a third straight day of gains. So it looks like, Carol, it may fall just a tad short of that all-time high.
Oh, so close, though. But what's interesting is I keep digging into kind of the individual trade of the S&P 500. You still have most names, remain lower. So even though we saw an intraday record, you still had about 325 names to the downside. So I just thought it was kind of an interesting yin-yang, if you will, in the trade.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem like the breadth is quite there. And even if you look at industry groups, you only have 3 industry groups actually in the green right now. Well, 2, and 1 is flat at this point. So the breadth just isn't there with today's trade.
And as we look at earnings, I'm reminded of the dollar's rally in the fourth quarter, up 7%, and how that's starting to weigh on those big cap names, Johnson & Johnson notably. But this is going to be a theme this earnings season.
Wow, you guys are downers. I mean, geez. So I was talking to Scott Rebner over at Goldman Sachs this morning, and he was saying technically we're set up for some serious re-rating and re-leveraging, particularly if the VIX stays lower, for example. Trend follows the CTA guys, the volatility-controlled funds, like they can all re-lever at this point. That would be a big boon for the market.
Yeah, certainly so. I guess valuations are a concern, but I do agree. Some of the pessimism, I understand where it's coming from, but a lot of people right now riding the momentum. And I guess the good thing about this market is you have found a way, or at least investors have found a way to really rotate. So they rotate out of small caps here on this Wednesday afternoon back into big caps as Netflix and some of those big names, Microsoft, Nvidia, lead the charge, setting the S&P 500 up for a close right around that 6,085 level. It takes a while for these numbers to settle, but remember the magic number was 6,090.27. That is the record high from December 6th. We're going to fall short of that by just a bit. Up 0.6% on the S&P, 1.3% on the NASDAQ composite closing at that 20,000 level. The Dow Jones Industrial Average getting in on the action with a 130-point gain, or about 0.3%. But mid-caps, transports, and the Russell all sitting it out. The Russell 2000, Carol, down 0.6%.
All right, got it. Back to the S&P 500 I go. And as I mentioned earlier, 328 names to the downside, guys. Scarlet, you got 174 actually gaining some ground today.
Yeah, and Tim kind of teased this idea that even though the S&P 500 up 0.6%, you look at the sector performances, and that's a lot of red on the screen there. In fact, only 2 sectors in the green right now, and you'll see it's really tech and communication services, each up at least 1%. In tech's case, up 2.5%. On the downside, energy and utilities losing about 1.8% and 2.2% respectively.
All right, what I'm going to say is that it was really good to do anything with, I felt like, AI today, or at least the news that came out of D.C. in terms of Donald Trump and his focus, the president, focus on AI infrastructure build. And he had a bunch of companies coming together. We talked about it yesterday, and it played over certainly in today's session. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I want to get to Netflix in particular. Let's start there because it did hit a record. Company reporting, as we know, we reported on it last night. Fourth quarter results beat expectations, boosted by its biggest quarterly subscriber gain in history. We talked about the live events really giving some oomph to their reporting. Company also boosted its 2025 revenue outlook and authorized an additional $15 billion stock buyback. Multiple analysts upgrading this name. So this stock is your number 1 gainer in the S&P 500, number 2 in the NASDAQ 100, finishing the day with a let me go back to it, up about 10%, forgive me. So yeah, up as much as 15% at its highs, but Netflix finishing the day with about a 10% gain. All right, Oracle, this going back to that AI theme, the news out of the Trump White House, President Trump making that announcement of a $100 billion joint venture to fund AI infrastructure work. A lot of companies that were announced in that, and that included Oracle. That one you saw up about 6.7% in today's session. And then you also had, I should point out too, 6th day that we've seen Oracle rallying, and its longest winning streak since late August. So we've seen a big bump up in this name over the last week or so. SoftBank also in that AI announcement, that one finishing with a gain of about 11%. It too is up for 5 days in a row. And then you also had ARM Holdings, which we know we had the CEO on our air just about an hour or so ago. And that went up about 16%. This one too hitting a record in today's session. Those are the ADRs that trade here in the United States.
All right, how about some of the decliners? No AI to speak of here. Ford shares fell today by 3.8%. We did see shares of automakers and car parts suppliers fall today, even as the broader market rallied, or I should say some bigger names rallied. Worries about potential tariffs certainly weighing on this group. Barclays also downgraded Ford to equal weight from overweight, citing volume headwinds in 2025 due to inventory destocking, as well as continued price normalization. Once again, shares of Ford down close to 4%. And then shares of Berkshire Hathaway falling today by 1.7%. Reuters reported that the Berkshire holding Pilot is shuttering its international oil trading business to refocus on Pilot flying J service stations and truck stops here in the U.S. Pilot, of course, a unit of Berkshire Hathaway. Once again, shares down 1.7%. We should say Pilot did not comment on whether it was exiting international trade, according to Reuters. And finally, shares of J&J falling just about 2% in today's trade. The company reported sales for its medtech unit missed the average analyst estimate for the fourth straight quarter. The company also reported mixed sales for its innovative medicine business in the fourth quarter of the year.
All right, just looking at the bond market here, a little bit of selling across the curve. We did get a 20-year auction today, so there was some supply to take down. Indirect bidding, pretty good. That's foreign demand. And the yield coming in at 4.9%. So definitely when you get those tasty yields, you definitely get the demand, guys.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the stories that are on our radar on this Wednesday. And this one has to do with Chanel cutting about 70 U.S. jobs in the United States. And they specifically talked about a challenging luxury environment here in the United States. So putting out a little bit of a warning. And keep in mind that this is a brand that is considered super resilient when it comes to the luxury space.
Well, I think what's kind of surprising to me about this news is just last week we got the news from Richemont that the last quarter beat estimates. It was strong performance at Cartier. There were ideas then that the worst may be over for the downturn in high-end products, but not necessarily, at least with this news from Chanel.
But I am curious, too. I mean, when we talk about sort of this idea, sort of what people are buying and what they're willing to buy, is this a reflection of the high-end consumer, or is this a reflection of kind of those strivers who kind of, bid up to buy, kind of the lower-end Chanel products? I don't know if they broke that down.
I don't know, but no. I do find it interesting, too, because I thought that it was China and it was Europe that was kind of struggling with luxury, and the U.S. was holding up. So we do wonder if we're going to hear more on this, or is this kind of like an anomaly on that end?
Before we continue this conversation, there are a few earnings from Electronic Arts, Knight Swift, as well as Kinder Morgan. Let's start with Kinder Morgan. Those shares down almost about 1.5% in the after-hours trade. The DCF per share coming in at 57 cents a share. That's a penny more than what the street was looking for. EBITDA, though, coming in just a touch light, and I say just a touch here. And here's your forecast going forward. The company says 2025 full-year adjusted EPS $1.27. The street was looking for $1.28.
And we have a pre-announcement from Electronic Arts. It doesn't actually report earnings until early February, but the company says it is now cutting its full-year net bookings. It's now going to be $7 billion to $7.15 billion. Previously, it had seen $7.5 to $7.8 billion. So that net bookings forecast missing the consensus estimate here.
Yeah, and also I should point out they said that it was a global football franchise experienced a slowdown in the third quarter. Wasn't that all like recession-proof at the end of the day? I guess not. Anyway, talk about recession-proof. You may not be buying your Chanel bags, maybe not the football games from Electronic Arts, but maybe you are going to Japan for your next luxury vacation, guys.
Who goes to Japan for luxury vacation?
Someone over there who just came back from a skiing trip.
But I didn't go to the luxury stores. I went to Uniqlo. I went to all the other stores that sold Japanese goods. And because of the strong dollar, everything felt like it was 30%, 40% cheaper.
But that's the point. Apparently, the number of inbound visitors is expected to increase to 40.2 million in 2025, driven by, in part, the weekend.
Yeah, well, there you go. And you know what? Lift tickets were really cheap compared to the Epic Pass in the U.S. Resorts. All you have to do is pay for the plane ticket there, and then after that,
What about lodging? I'm dying to do a ski trip to Japan. You've done it several times now, Scarlett. I hear great stuff about, the powder in Japan.
The powder's incredible. Let me just say that when you go eat at the ski lodge, you actually get to have like tonkatsu with curry as opposed to chicken fingers.
Oh my God!
What about lodging though? How's lodging?
Lodging's pretty amazing too. No tipping either.
All right, we're gonna have to continue this discussion.
Yeah, it's not part of the culture. Yeah.
Sounds like a road trip or a plane trip.
Yes.
All right, we got to wrap.
Trains, and automobiles.
Exactly. All right, that's our cross-platform coverage: radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals.
Road trip to Japan.
She did.
Does she know that it's an island?
I did say plane trip too.
All right, let's check it.
All right, we will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow, guys.